I know in the States you talked about the guy with the heat pump, but there's people who can generate their own power locally on their farms or wherever they are, and put it back into the grid.
Yeah.
And that'd be another way of approaching that, wouldn't it? If we can produce, well, I don't know how we could do that in the city, but certainly in rural areas, we could be contributing back into the grid rather than drawing from it all the time.
Sure.
The heat pump is a great solution.
Well, it's
as you say,
one part,
2.5, even 4-to-1 coefficient of performance. But the problem with this
you will know about them,
the
of
big
course.
problem with this, is that with heat pumps, and I mean it's a great technology because it is working at 250% efficiency up to 400%.
Yeah.
But the problem is we're generating electricity at such an incredibly low efficiency, 35% efficiency.
Oh,
Two-thirds are wasted before it gets to our buildings. The problem with it is, and then it's in Ireland, it's still 94% fossil fuel. So we have two major problems with our electricity. And unless we do, as you're talking about, look to micro wind generation and to all of the sources of energy from the oceans and from wave energy, we're not going to solve that problem. Because the same thing applies with our transport, doesn't it? Are we going to continue with fossil fuels much longer for driving our cars? Or have we got to make a shift to electric cars? I mean, are these the challenges that we face with our transport too?
With regards to overpopulation, you slightly suggested that the figure of 200,000 is a little bit alarming, and you didn't really go into what your thoughts were on that. So can you be the heretic?
Yeah, well, it's been... Duncan mentioned that I've been a conservationist since 1966, so that's 42 years, and that makes me quite an old stalwart, really, because I think one of the things we can take encouragement for is that we've had, 150 years of, nearly 200 years of the Industrial Revolution and the increase of wealth, but we've only had about 40, 50 years of people thinking, hey, wait a minute, this is not all the things. So, my thoughts are, first of all, that up to now, it's been the policy which dare not speak its name. It's been regarded as something which is so intimate, personal, and so connected to the most wonderful things in human life, having children, raising a family, that how could anybody possibly suggest that it's not just your personal affair? It's very difficult to get past that. And I think the only... one has to do it very gradually. And I mean, I repeat what I said. The first thing is to get a recognition that actually human numbers are part of the problem. I think we haven't even got to that first base, if you like, yet. I don't think many people would think it's relevant yet, but it's slowly coming through. And as Duncan and I were talking before this meeting, and it's slowly getting through. About 2 weeks ago, one of our government ministers said that he thought, in fact, I think he went further and said that the government would not wish the population of Britain to rise above 70 million. 63 million at the moment, I think. Boy, that is an achievement. I mean, that is the first time anybody has ever said that. And, I've been involved in lobbying MPs and so on for a long time, and most of them don't reply. 2 or 3 say you're right, and about 10 write abusively. We can't interfere, and so on. But of course, government policies across the world have tended to make people have more children than they might at first want. They've made various types of family planning difficult. They've prohibited abortion. They've we've had very poor educational status for women, so that women have no power within many cultures and so on. All of these things have tended to increase the birth rate. And okay, I would agree that on many occasions, children are wonderful and they have a way of making you love them. That's how they survive. And so many of these children who were not initially wanted become welcome members of the family. But many do not. You can buy children in many countries of the world right now. Many children are left abandoned in Mexico, in Kenya. My son works in Kenya. I know this. There are a lot of unwanted children.
60% of births, I think, are unwanted on the planet today.
I can believe that.
60%.
I can believe that. And what we want is every child a wanted child from before conception. And if we do that, as we were saying before, the basic birth rates of the whole of Europe are below replacement level. But that is terrifying to many politicians who think, we're going to run out of labour. We don't have people to pay pensions. We're going to have shortages of skills and so on. But this doesn't really make any sense. Firstly, I don't think most people realise their full potential. Secondly, to increase the birth rate, to encourage, as Australia and Germany are actively at the moment, encouraging an increase in the birth rate, to do that in order to solve the pensions problem is a bit simple-minded, isn't it? Because the new people whom you're adding to the population are also going to grow up and get older and want pensions. And so you're going to have more children born to replace them and to make them. And so the population is going to go on growing because you're always going to need more and more babies born to pay the pensions 60 years down the line. I mean, it's not exactly rocket science, is it?
How do you deal with the subject, too, of all of us want to see everybody living a higher quality of life, a higher standard of living? And when we look at us in Ireland, you know, every one of us, on average, emits 17.5 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. And we compare with people in the developing world who are very poor and, if you like, undernourished, who are starving to a great extent. But we would be contributing 200 times the CO2 emissions of them. But yet we want everybody to rise out of the poverty. How will this planet deal with that issue? What's the answer?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think there is an answer, frankly. I really don't. I think the trouble is that we are in such, I don't know what's the opposite of a fireproof position, a fire vulnerable position. How can we preach to India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Burkina Faso and say, look, I'm sorry, we think that you really had better not develop your country. You certainly better not develop your transport system reliable, depending on cars, because there's not enough fuel to go around anywhere the world's going to. How can we go to them and say that? I don't understand. It has to come from two ways. I mean, we have to get people above a certain level. We can't sit by without that. But surely it must mean sacrifice on our part. I don't see, and how are we to get sacrifice on our part? How is anybody going to suggest degrowth? I'm sorry, I don't want to. I was determined, absolutely determined, not to preach doom and gloom. It's so counterproductive. You know, there was Paul Ehrlich, who wrote 1965, I think, a book called The Population Bomb, which was very, very influential. He was asked to go everywhere, and he made a lot of money. And he actually used to hire private jets to fly on his lecture tours and so on. And somebody said to him, Paul, how can you possibly live this life of luxury when you're telling us that the world's going to hell in a handcart? And he said, well, if you know you're on the Titanic, why travel steerage? Desperately cynical. Mm-hmm. But what is one to say? This is what the United Nations should be debating, instead of how to stop genocide in Sudan, how to stop fighting in the Congo. This is poor people scrabbling for some of the Earth's resources, trying to build executive jets, trying to stuff Swiss bank accounts, because believe you me, or those of you who have any knowledge of Africa, I have little knowledge of Africa. Boy, does Africa deserve better politicians than it has now. It's a desperate situation. I don't have any easy solution to that. I suppose that all I can say that's encouraging is that more and more people are slowly coming round to this kind of thinking, and more young people too. Amongst young people, there is a feeling, a desperate feeling that it can't go on. I mean, it may not be going in the right channels, but it was impossible not to feel moved by the sight of those crowds of young people at Obama's rallies and so on. They were hungering for something, weren't they? And I mean, it's maybe not the kind of solutions that I'm seeking for here, or maybe you are seeking for, I don't know, but it's, I mean, that's the encouraging thing. I mean, I think that's why I've loved being a teacher, because each year you get a new injection of monkey glands, a new lot of
well, it's amazing
young
what's
people
happened
come
when
up.
you think 8 years ago we had the Bush administration and Cheney and Rumsfeld and all of this on top of us. And now the US has, if you like, made an about turn. Now, it does show that there is hope there, that one can go from this incredible, you know, neocons that were bringing the US into such an incredible situation, the Iraq War, all of the implications. But now we see that there is hope there,
yes,
that the people can actually
yes,
vote. To me, it's incredible to think that what's happened in the US, you know, this is something that we have never in my life experienced.
Completely.
And it's incredible that it's happened.
I agree.
And there is hope.
Absolutely agree. There is indeed. And, you know, James Burke said it all. You may think you can't do much, but just talking to your neighbours, and I've got a 22-year-old son, and I'm just trying to get him engaged in it. You know, I naively sort of sat him down the other day and said, he's interested in acting, wants to be an actor. So I said to him, come on, Josh, look, I just want you to know, you know, the sort of things that I've been engaged in here. And he, don't worry, Dad, I know about that. We're knowing about that. We've got a play going in Glasgow which is about environmental resources. Don't worry. I felt a bit better. I mean, young people are, it's their world. It's, you know, there are a lot of, there's enough left of the beautiful world to see me through. But I mean, anybody who has children is attached to the future. We are attached to the future.
I think in Ireland, I would feel that we're slightly lacking in the kind of outputs that there should be about the environment and sustainability, and not just programmes sectioned off from them, but actually in public discourse. Yes. And on politics shows. It's just not something that I hear enough of. And I think the BBC is obviously under so much fire now, and here's hoping that the Daily Mail can't bring them down, because it would be a huge disservice, I think, to society in the future if the BBC wasn't there and able to do the kind of programming that they're able to do at the moment. I think on the note about science, from my point of view, in Ireland we slightly lack people like yourself. I mean, people who are very, very passionate and very able to speak in a very engaging way and willingly to the public. And I don't, you know, want to offend any scientists, but I think we need more scientists who are willing to come out and engage in a very accessible way with the public in Ireland.
You mentioned the media, by the way. Yeah. Is the media doing enough in Ireland? How do you feel? Television? I'm in television. Radio, press, media. Is there enough going on in media to bring out science and to bring out a lot of this, the information that needs to be brought out? Is that happening or not happening in Ireland? Any comments on that?
I think that the mankind would start thinking only when they hit the bottom. Until we are, you know, some people are doing well, some not. The level of life are so different. A huge gap between levels of life here and there. And since we can't think, Ireland can't think about its own part of the world, we have only one world shared between all of us. So people, we can't solve much easier task altogether. I mean, just terrorism or, you know, you name it. It's a lot of unsolved tasks we can't solve. I mean, mankind as a whole, as a group. So I think we will have only a short, very small amount of time when we hit the bottom, and all of us just realize that, okay, we couldn't see the sun tomorrow. Only then people would start thinking, really thinking, not only like you, I appreciate your efforts. All, I just, I greatly, I love you. But the point is you are just only one of millions of people who don't care, and they wouldn't care about that because they don't have food to eat, and every minute a child dies because of hunger, and because of politicians' ambitions, elites, so-called ambitions, and so on. Yeah. It's it's like turbulence on the earth. Something is cold, something is hot, and we always have cycles in turbulence because something hot, cold water flow to, vice versa, and so on. The same in our society. Something poor, someone poor, someone rich. It's always moving. Lust for power, lust for better life. Mass media. It depends on country. In Ireland, in one mass media, in other countries, just different. So I'm afraid, pessimistic. At the moment, the only thing that it would happen maybe after my death, which is actually not good news for my son, but maybe so a bit. Just a kind of pessimistic note. Yeah. I'm sorry for this after this lecture.
Okay, but if I can summarize maybe what your view, sir, is that things have got to get worse before they can get better, and I think I agree with that. That means more kicks on the shin, more taps on the shoulder. But you see, okay, I do believe that this financial turmoil of the moment will set minds powerfully thinking, actually. I do believe that we can get some benefit from this. But of course, the fact is that for most people in the world, still, life is a real struggle. And the only way they can live is by over-exploiting and destroying some of the Earth's resources. The way that soils are being used, the way that water is being used, and so on. And we're to blame because the way we are using fossil energy is infinitely destructive. Very difficult to go back. Sorry, I beg your pardon, there's somebody up at the back there.
Yeah. This is the last question, yeah? Thank you.
Okay.
Yes?
I have to first make an admission, slightly embarrassed to admit I'm an economist. So,
okay. Yeah.
Economists are scientists.
I want to make an observation about the science community, if I may. I don't understand all the detail, but are you telling me that the science community actually have the answers and we just need to go to it, or what are you telling us?
If you were leading the world, what would you do as a scientist to heal the problems of this planet?
Well, I think I'm almost going to pass on that, but to respond to you, sir, I don't believe that technically, the problems are that difficult, actually. Because I think we have the way to generate sufficient energy, for instance, for everybody to have a very reasonable standard of living, but it will be lower than now. Science doesn't have an answer to enabling people to accept a material standard of living, shall we say, 1/3 less than it is now, which would be quite reasonable. After all, I grew up in the war with rationing and no travel. We were very happy and lived well. But now we find that unacceptable. And I was quoting to you, the wonderful old song, "How are you going to keep her down on the farm after she's seen Paris?" And that's the trouble, isn't it, with us, that we now have such high expectations. But if we took, this is what so many people argue with me about population control. They say population isn't the problem, it's this distribution of resources. If we distributed the world's resources more evenly, we've got plenty. Well, we could cope just about, but there's still 200,000 extra a day. So I don't think science doesn't have the answers to the social problems, which are the ones that the Archbishop of Dublin is addressing. That's people's attitudes. And that's for all of us. We're all of us in that equally, whether we are economists or biologists or grave diggers. It's the same for all of us. But what would I do first? I think I would try to call in Farrell Bradbury as an advisor and see if we could get going on a switch away to energy conservation. I think it would generate a huge amount of economic activity. Mind you, I suspect he'd be a difficult person to deal with. If I tell you that if you go onto his website, you will have an amusing time, because one of his other interests is creating the ecologically conservative golf course. He thinks that many people would benefit from having golf courses. He has designed golf courses for the roofs of large buildings, which give you all the 500-yard drives and so on and so forth. He's a clever, if eccentric man, but I think he's got something to say to us. But look, everybody would have their own thing. The first recognition is, to come to the nature of our situation, come back to it again, recognizing that the Earth is not limitless.
Thank you, Professor. And what a wonderful talk, and I think very, very good interaction. And thank everybody here for coming tonight and participating in this discussion. I'd like to acknowledge Discover Science and Engineering, who's the organisers of Science Week, and the Science Gallery here for hosting the event. And also, this lecture will also be available on Science Week website, which is www.scienceweek.ie from next week, to encourage people to get involved. Also, I think just to say that Discover Science and Engineering is the National Integrated Awareness Programme managed by FIRFOS on behalf of the Office of Science and Technology. Its objectives are to increase the numbers of students studying the physical sciences, to promote a positive attitude to careers in science, engineering and technology, and to foster a greater understanding of science and its value in Irish society. And they have a website, www.discover/science.ie. And I think that's just something just to mention, because I think we're all here because of our belief in science. And I think, Professor, you've inspired us tonight about our hope and belief and the love for science, because that's where we have to go. Yeah. We need science, and we need scientists, and we need a scientific approach to this planet if we're going to face the challenges. So thank you, Professor.